Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone, and welcome to the latest editions of the Rider Rumblings video podcast. There's absolutely nothing to discuss this week, so I think we'll be able to keep this within, say, 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
My goodness, I'm here with Murray McCormick, a Leader Post's veteran football writer. Roughriders are coming off a 23-17 loss in Calgary, one that was eventful not only during the game, but afterwards, given some of the things said by Cody Fajardo. And it was almost prophetic in that a lot of what he said seems to have been addressed, at least in part, by the announcement Monday that the Roughriders have signed Duke Williams, who should help to address the Roughriders' moribund vertical passing game. But first, here's my dog. There's Candy. I also must note that I have not heard of this invention called earbuds, so I'm still wearing these 1960s style headphones, and there may be a test pattern appearing on this podcast very soon, given my lack of recognition of the times. Anyway, Mur, you were at the game on Friday. My condolences. Saturday. What did you make of whatever that was?
I'm going to throw something out there. First off, Calgary's perhaps one of the worst stadiums to watch the Riders play in. First off, they're on the other side of the field, which is distant. So all this chaos that was going around there, I hate to say it, but of the 7 people in the press box, it looked relatively normal. It was just watching it again on TV to see when they're focusing on the chaos, you realize it's crazy out there. And I thought we'd be doing more Rider grumblings today than Rider rumblings, because I to take the back, just because I think Duke Williams is kind of taking some of the heat off of. Well, I don't know. The signing of Duke Williams does something. I was going to ask you that. Does it put more heat on Fajardo and Moz, or does it take the heat off Fajardo and Moz, or is that? Because I kind of want to head to because that's the big news of right off the spot. But does that take the heat off of them, or does it put more pressure on that Cody kind of went out there and told people that they need something more than what they had, and then 2 days later the Riders signed Duke Williams. So is the pressure on now for Cody to follow up that request, rant, demand? I don't know how we word that frustration.
A very candid post-game dissertation on the woes that have afflicted the Roughriders offense. Ultimately, I think it should alleviate the heat, because not only Duke Williams being signed, but Shaq Evans should be back perhaps on October 23rd, the same day on which Duke Williams is expected to make his debut with the Roughriders. So you infuse those 2 weapons into the lineup, 2 CFL All-Stars, Williams in 2018, Shaq Evans in 2019. And I don't know how that doesn't help your passing attack. Now, I don't think the adjustment will be serious for Duke Williams, because he knows the Jason Moss system. He's played in it. So it's not like you're going to have to wait a few weeks for him to get used to it. He already knows the terminology. So that should help. I think they'll need maybe some time to establish a rapport. At least Duke Williams will with Cody Fajardo. So that may require a little bit of an adjustment. Even when Weston Dressler was infused back into the Roughriders lineup at Labor Day 2014, it's not like he and Darian Durant picked up where they'd left off in 2013. It did not happen in that game, and then it did not happen at all after Darian was injured the following week. So,
and Andy Fantuz too. Throw Andy Fantuz in there when he came back from the States. But it took him a while to catch up to where he was.
He never did in 2011. It's a really good example. Yet, Rhett Dawson showed up out of nowhere in 1974. Riders played Calgary. Ron Lancaster threw 2 touchdown passes to him in his first game, and it was like he had another Hugh Campbell. And when Hugh Campbell arrived in '63, it didn't take long for Ronnie and Hugh to establish a rapport. Joey Walters shows up midway through the '77 season. Him and Ronnie got along great. Then again, there's a Weston Dressler example from 2014. So sometimes you can just put somebody in there, and it's like they've been playing in that system all their lives, and sometimes it takes a while. With this offense, I think the likelihood is that it may take a while, because yes, it'll be nice to have Shaq Evans back. Yes, it'll be nice to have Duke Williams. But if the other issues, the ones that were exposed for all to see on Saturday, aren't addressed, will it matter? If Cody Fajardo doesn't have enough time to get the ball to either of those players, you could have DeAndre Hopkins in there and it wouldn't make a difference. And if Cody Fajardo, can't make the deep connections when they are there, which isn't very often, that won't matter either. He's had Kyran Moore wide open twice this season for what should have been touchdowns and missed them both times. Keenan LaFrance was open in the end zone on Saturday. He missed them there, although he had a pass pressher kind of
and there was
altering the trajectory of the throw. So
and there's a
if he's not going to hit those passes, it doesn't matter who you have running the patterns.
There's also a Calgary defender within the area code of Keon LaFrance too on that passing play. Not Keenan. Where Kyran was wide open. Like that's like one of the worst passes. I wonder if we're just to take it back to the Duke a little bit though. Are we putting too much pressure on him? Because how many times have we seen guys come back from the NFL and not be able to perform? And I know Duke Williams, he's been now there for 3 years. He's had 2 years up here. And I wonder if our expectations maybe tempered down a little bit for the guy, knowing that he's been away for 3 years and he's been away from the CFL. Or should we be this excited about a all-star from 2018 who's
not like
3 years older?
It's not like the BC Lions are bringing back a washed-up Mervyn Fernandez once upon a time. He's 28 years old. I mean, he's 2 years younger than Shaq Evans. Mm-hmm. So
should be able to
I don't think there's he's only a year older than Ricardo Lewis. So I don't think there's a real reason to worry that there's going to be a prolonged adjustment period there. I just think the offense as a whole has got to get better for their talents, for the talents of Evans and Williams to be exploited to the degree that's going to help this offense. If Cody doesn't have time to throw, what's he going to do? If he's not going to hit the wide open receivers when they are there, what's he going to do? So if Jason Moss doesn't start calling a better game, what are they going to do? If the running game is going well and then they suddenly forget that they have a running game, again, the Calgary Stampeders very rarely rushed with more than 4 men on Saturday. The only time I noticed it was on the second and 2 play from the Stampeders 40-yard line late in the game, and they sent a 5th person, which was the only time I noticed the whole game that they sent more than 4, and that's when they sacked Cody Fajardo. The one time they sent a blitz, Cody Fajardo was sacked, not by the blitzer, but by a nose tackle who just blew up the Roughrider offensive line. So if they can't block 4 guys when they virtually know 4 guys are coming and those 4 players should be outnumbered by the 5 on the offensive line, what difference is it going to make? On that final play, the interception that was on a pass intended for Ricardo Lewis, they kept Braden Lenius in the backfield. William Powell was in the backfield, and they sent out 4 receivers. So it was 4 receivers against 8. So if that's going to be the philosophy, now I wasn't really that adept at math, but 8 is greater than 4. In fact, I believe that to be twice the number. So if you're going to send 4 receivers against 8 defenders at a time when you need to complete a pass for 10 yards, philosophically, you're pretty much tying your hands. And so they've got to make some adjustments. And they needed the extra protection because even though Calgary was rushing 4, it still took William Powell to make a block in order to afford Cody enough time to throw the interception. So,
and he still picked the last guy to throw it to. Really?
Yeah. The best option on that play would have been Mitch Picton. Yeah. But the only option on that play would have been Mitch Picton.
But even he wasn't like wide open. It wasn't that they were looking deep from the word go. Right and give Cody a little bit of credit. He managed to get it to the area, but it was just you could float. Like I don't even think Lewis had a chance to catch that. I don't think Lewis. I looked at it again he didn't even put his arms up to try to catch it.
No, he was playing defensive back, and Moxie was in the role of the receiver on that one. But if you look at that play, Ken Schaefer-Baker runs a double move down the left sideline. I don't think you're going to fool anybody with a double move in that situation. So he was out of the equation. Kyran Moore ran a in pattern or dig route, whatever you want to call it, about 15 yards. He did not look especially vigorous in running that pattern, and the cut over the middle was kind of rounded off. It looked like, watching him run that pattern, it looked like he wasn't expecting to be the primary target there. Mitch Picton lined up in the left slot closest to Cody Fajardo, went out 5 yards and then went diagonally. It looked like he had a chance to be open, but it would have taken a touch pass to float it into that void in the zone. But I think the part of the worst option on the play was a wide side throw to a receiver who in all but one game has not been a factor. who was
And in
just
double
happened to be double covered because everybody was going to be double covered mathematically. That did not have a chance of working. It just didn't.
They
Why
should
not
even,
send everybody deep and have Cody run a quarterback draw if you're
or
going to
even
do
play
that?
action to William Powell. Like William Powell had a pretty good game. I know the yardage wasn't up
Well,
there.
play action wasn't going to work on 3rd and 10. That's not going to fool anybody.
Well, you can try something to fool him other than just dropping back and hucking and chucking it.
Well, they didn't have anybody near the 38-yard line. The closest receiver was on the 32 or 33, and that was Kyran Moore. You've got to get 10 yards. That's a minimum in that situation. You got to get 10 yards. And the pass was intercepted with 25 seconds left. So had they gotten to the 38-yard line with 25 seconds left, they still would have had at least a reasonable chance at moving. They would have time for 3 plays in that situation, unless they totally frittered away the clock, which isn't out of the realm of possibility. But that was a lousy call, and it was a lousy throw. And it was a lousy performance by the offense as a whole, save for one drive that included a 22-yard run by William Powell, a 4-yard touchdown run by William Powell, and a 71-yard pass to Keon Schaefer-Baker. Aside from that, just an absolutely somniferous performance by the offense. And they're past the midway point of the season. It's not like they're still getting to know each other.
Well, what do you think about them giving up back-to-back touchdowns to start too on offense, on defense? Like that's that's Bo Levi looked like he was going to run away with that one.
And he didn't have a receiving core that was any better than Saskatchewan's. They were without their 2 leading receivers. And suddenly Sean Bain is ripping them apart early in the game. First on a deep route or a corner route in the first quarter, and then a touchdown. So was Calgary any better off receiving wise than Saskatchewan? I would argue no, but Bo Levi Mitchell made it happen. And right before the second Calgary touchdown, the Riders had it's statistically they called it a 3rd and 2, but it looked more like a 3rd and 3. And Kyran Moore is wide open, and he doesn't make the pass. And I have no problem with the call because honestly, it was pick your target. Braden Lenius was open, William Powell was open. If they just wanted to take the short little flip pass for a first down, it was there. But the big play was there to Kyran Moore, and how that could have changed the game. And he didn't put any air under the ball and pretty much let the air out of the Riders' tires. Calgary goes down and scores. It's a 14-point swing in a game that was ultimately decided by 6.
Exactly. And the defense did kind of buckle down after that. They gave up 9 points after that point, from that point, and they kind of limited. And of course, Bo Levi appeared to get hurt a little bit, kind of damaged his re-injured shoulder a little bit. So with the status, he's still supposed to play on, well, I don't know what he's supposed to do on Saturday. We'll still keep an eye on that. But Jake Mayer is pretty good too, so they might have some options there. I know this is going to be on. What about Brett Lowther's game? Is it getting overshadowed by everything happened to him right there? Like, what, he's 3 for 3 field goals, now 8 for 8? After
a 4 for 9 swoon. He was 10 for 10, then 4 for 9, now 8 for 8. And then, of course, he recovered his own onside kick.
And I think the second, I forgot the second one they called a timeout on, but even I think the second one was catchable too. Or someone looked like so you maybe can. How often do you see one onside kick work, and then you see 3 onside kicks work? I don't know how close the second one was, but because I never could find. But
you thought after the first one went against them, you thought there's no way.
What a strange world in the CFL. If a penalty goes against you, okay, but you keep the ball. Isn't that a weird, like, what's the penalty for that? You still keep the ball? Is that still to encourage onside kicks and illegal interference? Because obviously that legal interference call, well, not obviously, probably led to case.
But if Calgary, the option then was for Calgary to decline the penalty. And if they decline the penalty,
they lose the ball.
The ball. So what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
But the Riders did get that second chance, and Brett Lowther with an amazing play.
Amazing. Never seen that.
The Riders have athletes for kickers. Yeah, I mean, you look at that play that Brett Lowther made. That was a terrific athletic play, and their punter was an all-star receiver with the U of R Rams, and was an amazing player with the Sheldon Williams Spartans. Was also a goaltender once, and a lacrosse player at once upon a time. So they've got some good athletes at kickers. I'm not sure if they have good athletes at the receiving positions, however.
Well, things that, I kind of remember, and I know this is gonna. Didn't Jason Claremont score on an onside kick with the Rams way back in the days?
No, Chris Warneke.
Chris Warneke? Okay. Remember that one?
I was at that game.
So sorry, Jason, but sorry, Chris. I remember that.
They were 1A and 1B with the Rams. Chris Warneke, I've talked to some people who have said, Jason Claremont had a great CFL career, and nothing against Jason Claremont. But the forgotten player from those Rams teams was Chris Warnke. He was such an amazing athlete that there's a lot of people who to this day think that Chris Warnke could have been a terrific player in the Canadian Football League. Talking about great athletes, this is someone who played basketball for the U of R Cougars at the same time played football for the U of R Rams. Is it a pure athlete? I'm not sure there's been a better one ever to play intercollegiate sports in Regina. Chris Warnke's still playing senior men's basketball and is still dunking.
Really?
I mean, yeah, he's an absolutely amazing player. So it isn't surprising.
When I saw KSB going down the side, and that's what I immediately thought back, because it's many years ago, and I thought he might score. He might score. Wouldn't that have been crazy if he'd scored and had to call back? But
yeah, well, they have scored on 2 of those in their history. Cleveland Van against the Edmonton Eskimos in 1976.
Cleveland Van
and Steve Dennis against the Hamilton Tiger Cats in 1981. So it's not without precedent for them to score, for the Roughriders to score an onside kick, but they haven't done it for 40 years.
Yeah. Okay. So Rob, just a little bit back to Duke Williams again. He comes back for October 23rd. Yes, great stuff. Where do they put him? Where do you get out of that roster to get Duke Williams on the roster?
Well, for all the Ricardo Lewis fans out there, I think you better enjoy watching him play on Saturday, because barring an impressive performance, that should be it. That's just to me, that's a simple flip. Duke Williams for Lewis.
But Williams has
Shaq Evans goes back to his accustomed wide side spot. Maybe you can work a rotation with Keon Schaefer-Baker, move him inside with his athleticism, and then have him running the waggle as well. Maybe he could be even better, and with his size as an inside receiver too, I think that would be beneficial. So look at this receiving core all of a sudden. If you've got Duke Williams, Shaq Evans, Kyran Moore, Keon Schaefer-Baker, my goodness.
And
if you got weapons, Braden Lennius,
Lewis,
Ricardo Lewis, that's the obvious odd man out there.
Yeah.
1 out of 5 games he's been a factor.
And the Riders are in a position too where they have options, because they started 9 Canadians on Saturday.
They don't have 3.
They don't have any. The guys going through the roster, except now, do they want to keep that? Because I think they want Andrew Lauderdale back. I just don't. I think they need something.
They need him back.
They need him back, and I think that's a big sign of what's going to happen. That Lauderdale is going to come back, and then.
But even then, they still have enough. If Lauderdale starts, that still means they're starting 8 Canadians. Yeah. So that gives them the latitude. They just if you start 7 and then somebody gets hurt, then you have to make in-game adjustments. But they're in pretty good shape there, Canadian-wise.
They're pretty. So, how are they in good shape, Rob, regarding this season? Put me in a big picture view of this. Is it? We saw the first time of a totally, because Cody Fajardo has been the most upbeat quarterback in a long time. He rarely. We only see him lose. How many times have we seen him lose? So it's not really. You don't really see what he reacts. But in the big picture thing, should we be hitting the panic button, or thinking that, okay, they go on the road, it's reasonably tough environment. I don't think it was as tough as unbalanced as there's enough Rider fans. Not a lot. There's enough of them to kind of counteract the Stampeders noise. But is this the panic button? Are we thinking about things are going to look shaky from here on in, or is it just a blip?
Well, it's certainly a pivotal point in the season where they've got to respond to this. They've just finished losing to a 2-5 team. Now they're playing a 3-5 team at home. They should win that. If they don't win this on Saturday, they're suddenly 5-4 and going to play the same team a third time that they've just lost to twice. So if they lose on Saturday, they can pretty much call themselves a 500 team 2 weeks later. So this Saturday game and there's no Duke Williams coming into the lineup for this game.
No.
There's no Shaq Evans coming back for this game. They've got to win with a team that fell short in many ways on Saturday. And Cody Fajardo's got to up his game. I don't argue with anything he said. I don't think you can. Some people have said he threw some teammates under the bus and that he was pointing the finger at others. Cody Fajardo has been the first to point the finger at himself several times. Now, he hasn't had a lot of losing situations with the Roughriders, but when he's played poorly, he's been very quick to put the onus on himself, excessively so in some cases. What did he say that was inaccurate? Now, the only inaccuracy I can point to has been Cody Fajardo on some of the deep throws that have been there, and so he's got to make those throws. Those plays, when those plays are there, and it isn't very often, he's got to make them. And he also said on Saturday that he's got to play better, and he reiterated that point.
Yep.
So I don't take issue with what he said. Maybe this is the wake-up call that they needed. When somebody like Cody Fajardo says what he says, how does that not send shockwaves through the dressing room? How does that not wake people up? I think that could be more productive than destructive. Well, we'll have a better idea on Saturday around 8 p.m. But when somebody who is typically deferential to his teammates, and somebody who's always so respectful and always so upbeat, when he reaches a boiling point to the degree that he does, maybe that just gives the Roughriders the shock they need. Because they've been getting away for a lot of the season with not having a deep passing game. They've been getting away with not having the kind of protection up front that they need. They've been able to survive that. Even at 5-3, they're still alone in second place. They're in good shape, but they've been getting away with a few. And there are some games where, look at the 2 games against BC. If they can make BC can make field goals in the first game, Riders maybe lose that. If BC doesn't miss that 43-yard field goal in the second game against the Lions, the Riders lose that. So the margin for error has been pretty small in some of those games. And if you reverse the outcome of those BC games, suddenly 5-3 is 3-5, and they're in real trouble. And it's maybe a handful of plays for this team, the difference between 5-3 and 3-5. So I think what Cody Fajardo said was not only accurate, but very timely and could ultimately prove to be productive. But he's also going to be part of the solution now. He can't. It's folly to think that everybody else around Cody Fajardo's got to up their game, and he doesn't. He needs to be part of that solution, and he made that very clear as well.
Do you think they had to be working on the Williams deal before the game? Like, I know people are saying, "Oh, this is Jeremy O'Day's reaction to Cody Fajardo's frustrations." They signed Williams 2 days later. I kind of wonder if they had to be working on that deal ahead of time.
Oh, yeah.
And getting close, because Jeremy is not shown to be the type of guy to overreact and do something like that. Just not overreact, but just boom, it all happens. He signs, you get the money together. So it was probably set up before the game. And I wonder if Cody knew about it before the game or knew there was talk of it.
Well, it's certainly what he said after the game certainly proved to be prescient 2 days later when they announced it. But what I wonder is, okay, they were negotiating with Duke Williams. After Saturday, did they top up the offer to make sure they do get Duke Williams? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's the question, and we'll never know. But that's what makes me wonder in this situation is did they sweeten the pot after Saturday, knowing this guy's out there, can we afford not to get him? And if they don't get him, then he ends up playing against them.
Yeah. Well, remember the uproar when Derek Moncrief signed with the Elks? The Riders let this one get away. But at the time, the Riders didn't really need him. Micah Kites was playing well.
I still don't think they do.
I don't think, but they needed.
Micah Kites has been terrific for them.
They needed Duke
Godfrey Onyeka's played well.
Yeah. So they
John
needed.
Lacey's played well.
So the money they saved with Derek Moncrief, they could put towards Duke Williams. Let's say they had signed him. I don't think he was really on their radar, but they got him. So now they had the money to spend on Duke Williams for something they desperately needed. Which is funny. If you had told us at the beginning of the season that the Riders would have to go out and sign a receiver of Williams together, we'd probably say, no, I don't think so. It's a pretty good receiving core, we thought at the beginning of the season. We didn't think there'd be the big issues. We knew there'd be issues with the offensive line, and we wondered if their 33-year-old running back, what would happen with him. But we're pretty confident in those receiving group, weren't we back then?
Well, the problem seemed to be that, and it was a nice problem to have, where are you going to find spots for all these players? Yeah. It was like people were raving about the Canadian receivers, and they have by and large been productive. Braden Lenius had a horrible game on Saturday, but he also has 4 of their 5 longest receptions this season. Keon Schaefer-Baker, he's got to stay in the lineup regardless of what happens now. He's a absolute keeper and an absolute steal. Mitch Picton's been reliable, but he would seem to me to be the odd man out in the equation once you add in Duke Williams and Shaq Evans. To me, the flip there is Ricardo Lewis and Mitch Picton, because they just aren't using him very often. Even though he would have been the best target on that last play. But yeah, and then you're looking at it. Okay, they've got Jordan Williams-Lambert, they got Shaq Evans, they got Kyran Moore. Where do you find playing time for Paul McRoberts? I mean, that seemed to be one of the huge questions. And Jake Hardy was looking so terrific in the preseason, and what's happened to him? So what seemed to be an area of strength is now a liability, to the extent that they had to go out and spend some coin to get Duke Williams. That's a great point, Mer.
Another interesting point too. Braden Lanius took a big hit. I think that was him coming across the middle. We just got rocked. That was a big fair hit with the shoulder pads and everything. I kind of like to see those hits in football still. That it's not out loud that you can't give a guy a good hit. But
and there seem to be some communications issues on at least one play.
Cody talked about he's got to enunciate better. Hey, I know about enunciations. But I that's the first time I'd ever heard of that, where a quarterback was worried about how he enunciated and was wondering about the offensive line understanding him. And I thought that's interesting.
Well, remember, who pointed this out? Was it Jamie Nye? I think it was Jamie Nye the other day. He pointed out that in the explanation, Jamie of the Green Zone, he pointed out that in the explanation of the 13th man unraveling against Montreal, that the Riders had two special teams plays that with names that were virtually identical, and that there was some miscommunication because one term sounded like the other term. So, I don't know. I don't understand why in situations where you've got playing half your games on the road, and a lot of times you have to deal with crowd noise, why would you have words that sound pretty much the same as terminology?
13th man 13th.
It's a little scary when again, this far into the season, you're dealing with those issues. We'd never heard that before. That's a new one. There were a lot of new ones on Saturday. That was such a weird game, and all that went wrong, and the Roughriders had a chance to win it.
Or they had a chance to win, and I still, even I said play action. I take that back. Just hand it off to Powell. He could have gained 10 yards too. I don't think that
situation. I don't think the handoff is.
But
that's also a bit of a clock gobbler.
Yeah.
But and they ultimately needed him to provide the protection. It just.
Yeah. And that's what he does. He's one of the best in the league at it too.
People have said, was it Jason Moss's call, or was it Cody's execution of the play? Well, what option did Cody Fajardo have but to go deep on that play?
Yeah.
Again, Williams, Schaefer Baker down the left sideline, Lewis down the right sideline, Picton running a vertical, sort of, a deeper diagonal route, and the only target over the middle was Kyran Moore 15 yards downfield, and he didn't even seem to be a factor from the snap. So regardless of what the call was, he had no option but to go deep. And here we are dissecting it a few days later.
Hey, let's go a little defensive yin and yang. AC Leonard comes back. I think had an outstanding game, couple sacks. He chased down quarterbacks. He looked like his regular self. Nick Marshall, at least 3 or 4 yards out of bounds, slams Braun in the back and gets an unnecessary roughness penalty. Like, what's going on?
And it's not the first. This team has taken, and Craig Dickinson has lamented these needless, well, in that case, it wasn't a 15-yard penalty because it was half the distance to the goal line, but these needless penalties over and over. And at what point does it sink in? That penalty to Marshall wasn't especially costly because it didn't lead to a marching off of a lot of yards.
But it's still
it's indicative of a mentality and a mindset on this team that has been allowed to persist and has not been addressed. It's an emotional game. Things are going to happen, but that's a bad sign when it's despite the repeated laments of the head coach, there are just more instances of it.
But that was it. Why even bother that play?
I know that
he didn't slam him in the back. I'll take that back. He hit him in the back with his hand. It was just what's the point of that? Like, I know he's frustrated, got beaten on a good pass, but don't do it. Just don't do it. Like in the offsides they get in the procedure, because basically now when you watch, you see a flag, and it's going to be offside on the Riders or a legal procedure. You're kind of giving up on they're going to get a penalty. You don't think it's going to go the other way. So that's got to be addressed. I don't know how they address it. They talk about they do it in practices and they do it in meetings and they talk about it, but it's still on the field. It's still happening too far.
And they're selfish penalties. They're
Yeah.
just absolutely selfish penalties. And you talk about putting yourself above the team, and there's been some talk on social media and in some emails and on some talk shows about, did Cody Fajardo do that on Saturday? I don't believe he did, but a penalty such as the roughing penalty, that does put yourself above the team.
Mhm.
And that's a bad sign, and it just happens too often. And so the Roughriders, I think there's a lot to clean up. They're still in pretty good shape at 5-3,
But
but
they would have been in perfect shape with the win.
yeah,
That would have given them, that could have almost like, I was looking at the standings and they have a little box on that says clinched playoff berth. They haven't put that out yet, obviously not. But I'm looking at where Winnipeg's saying comes. You may as well just throw it right out besides Winnipeg saying they clinched the playoff berth. They're
Yeah.
7-1. I can't see them, like we've seen Calgary a lot of times roll through the regular season, then struggle in the playoffs. It happens, but I don't know. This Winnipeg team, did you see any holes out there? Even they used to have a hole in the kicking game. It looks like they've kind of addressed that in some
well,
sense.
the Kenny Lawler situation is interesting.
Yes,
So
but can I say? I don't think kudos. The Blue Bombers got in front of that right away. That press release was out last night. Not right away, as close as they could. Supposedly Lawler's meeting with the media today to discuss what happened about there, and it put his sides. It takes me back to when Odell Willis, way back when, had the impaired driving in the off season.
Charleston Hughes here a few years ago.
Charleston Hughes, and yeah, so unfortunately these guys are human. They make stupid decisions, and there's a price to be paid. I think he's going to miss that game for sure. I think maybe they'll tag another one on there for. I'm guessing, but who knows? Maybe I think Charleston only missed one game with his DUI, so maybe that's the precedent's already set for that. But I'll give the Bombers credit that they didn't hide from what they got on the front of it, and that's what they got to do now. You can't sort of say, well, we don't want to talk about it. You have to almost address those kind of issues, unlike what they did with AC Leonard when they put it off a little bit longer than that. But in the end, interesting thing too, and I know it's another. Gary Peters does the same things to a doping official, and he ends up appealing his and getting a fine. So the kind of AC Leonard didn't appeal and gets a suspension. So you wonder why he didn't want to go that route, but we don't know about that one.
Didn't he appeal? I thought he did appeal.
Well, I don't know. How did he keep the suspension then? I don't, because I don't.
Maybe, was it upheld? Anyway, I'm not sure.
I'm not going to. I just saying. Anyway, I hate to bring up stuff we have questions for. We have no questions this week either, do we?
No, we don't. And it's very upsetting. But if you do have questions, feel free to email me, rvanstone@postmedia.com. We'd be happy to discuss any questions that you would be kind enough to send us. Looking ahead to Saturday, what do you expect now that the Riders are at home to Calgary?
That's a good question.
And if you don't win it, they've got 4 of their last 5 games at home. I mean, on the road.
On the road, I know.
I mean, this is really pivotal just because of location as much as anything.
And, I was going to just before getting that, what do you think of the crowd's going to be like Thanksgiving weekend, Saturday, later kickoff? Do you think it's going to be more like the last home game here? Will it look sizably under 20,000? What do you think? The crowd?
Yeah, I mean, they'll still probably announce 25, 26 regardless, because that's how many tickets they're selling. But if you look around at what the response has been to sporting events, I think what happened at the Riders' last game is probably more indicative of what you might expect. The Regina Pats only got 4,200 people for their first home game with fans since March 11th of 2020. If you look around the major junior ranks, they're just not getting big crowds, even for home openers that should have whetted the appetite of people who haven't seen things like this for a while. So there's an unquestioned hesitancy to patronize.
Busy Saturday
events, right?
too. Busy Saturday for Regina sports. You had the Pats, you had the Riders, and I think the Rams played Saturday night too, didn't they? Or was that Sunday?
The Rams are idle this weekend.
No, last weekend.
Are you talking this past weekend?
Yeah, that's past weekend.
Rams played. They deserve a shout out too. They beat the University of Calgary Dinos 34-21. There's a Rider connection. Deshaun Mims, who caught 2 touchdown passes for the Rams, it's part of a 21-point second quarter. His father is Robert Mims, who in 1996 was named the most outstanding player in the West Division.
The 2 brothers too is not from a Rider connection, but the 2 Rider Calgary Deceivers. Sorry, I've drawn a blank. The running back. Corey.
Oh, the Philpott brothers, yeah.
Philpott brothers. Sorry, folks. I apologize.
It was like a 106-yard reception by a Philpott in that game. I mean, it was. I wish I'd gone. I was at the Pats game, and the Pats started at 1, the Rams started at 2, and the Riders started at 5. So I thought the only event that I'll have a chance to see through its conclusion and still see the Rider game is the Pats game. So I went to that. I wish I'd gone to the Rams game. I wish I'd been able to go as well. It drives me nuts when the Rams and Pats, or when any teams in this community schedule opposite one another. I understand in this case it was unavoidable because CBC wanted to show the Pats game nationally, and so it was shifted from an evening game to an afternoon game. Had it been an evening game, then I wouldn't be able to see it at all because of the Rider game. So, but it's just, in a small community like this, it just absolutely gores my ox when sports fans have to choose between A and B or C. There's not a lot to. There's now COVID has been a bit of a factor too, and teams have drawn up schedules later than was once the case, and with a little more urgency. But still, I wish teams could stay out of each other's way so you can go see everything.
So anyway, a little quickly back to Saturday's game. Riders got to win, must win, or I think Jamie Nye came up, must win or can't afford to lose. How's that? I think that was one of Jamie Nye's lines the other day when I heard him on the radio. So they can't afford to lose it. They must win. Got to play a little better. Offensive line's got to play a lot better. I think defensively they can still beat them. Still think they can do it with the defense, but there's a lot of things going on with offense. And as I said, other than way back at the beginning of the season, we wouldn't have had these concerns. We didn't have these concerns, but for season, regardless of the length, has a way of showing teams' faults and strengths. And this one, I think we're seeing there's faults right now.
You got to look at it though. Even some of the best teams in Riders history, some of the best seasons that they've had have not been without incident, without a pothole. If you look at the '89 season, there was the game against the BC Lions where Glenn Suter took the pass interference penalty on David Williams with no time remaining. Riders went to 4-5 as a result of that loss to the BC Lions, and they ended up winning the Grey Cup. In 2013, what's that?
Weren't they 9-9 in '89?
They finished 9-9, but they were 4-5 at one point after that loss to BC.
I know that, but I'm just saying they were 9-9.
If you look at the 2013 season, they had the infamous Dudney Avenue incident at midseason, and they also had a spell in that season where they lost 4 consecutive games. If you look at the 2007 season, they had a stretch just beyond midseason where Matt Dominguez gets hurt and they lose 3 games in a row. So even some of the best, some of the champions, 66, they didn't really run into something that disruptive or potentially disruptive, but it was also a 9-6-1 team. It wasn't a real, after a strong start, that team pretty much leveled off. It wasn't a joyride for the 66 Roughriders to get to the Grey Cup. So the 4 championship seasons in Rider history, they've all had some points where they've had to address and overcome some adversity. And at 5-3, they've built themselves a bit of a cushion and some wiggle room to the point where I don't think this is a must-win game. They could lose their next 2 and still be a 500 team and probably get into the playoffs. But every game becomes a little more important when there's only 14 of them as opposed to 18.
That's when you're talking about those other games, those other seasons, they could bounce back from an extended losing streak. There's no time to bounce back, and they're on the road so much. And I know that's every team has to deal with their foibles and the way the season's drawn up. Like, geez, what is Edmonton playing? 3 games in 7 days, I think. Yeah,
it's almost it's ridiculous, but
that's their hockey schedule. Yeah, that's the only thing. But I think I'm kind of looking forward to Thanksgiving week and then a bye week, and then it's a full-on sprint to the end of the season. God knows when that'll be. Imagine covering football in December. Like I can't remember the last Grey Cup was in December. I think there was one though.
There have been. Well, in 1972, the Grey Cup was in December in Hamilton, and here they are in December in Hamilton again. Now that may be an eerie flashback for Rider fans because that was Ian Sunter kicking the field goal in the last play to give the Tiger Cats a 13-10 victory over the Roughriders. So a Grey Cup in December may be a good omen in that the Roughriders, a Grey Cup in Hamilton in December may be a good omen, and the Roughriders have gotten to one before. And there's another one. John Hodge had something on 3 Down Nation that was really cool. Winnipeg, if they finish first in the West, if they host the West Final, it will be the first time they've played host to the West Final since 1972. they've had other first place finishes, but remember that they were in the East when they did that. So John Hodge of Three Down Nation had this cool piece on first time since 72 that the Bombers could play host to the West Final. What happened in 1972? The Riders went to Winnipeg and defeated the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So on a late field goal by Jack Abanchan. I was at that game. It was my first plane ride. So I was 8 years old. So if you look at it, Winnipeg playing host to the West Final, Grey Cup in Hamilton. That hasn't happened since 72. Maybe that's a good omen for the Roughriders as long as you subtract the Ian Sunter field goal.
Well, I remember that game because I was living in Thompson, Manitoba with my family. And for some reason, it wasn't on TV. And we drove around Thompson for the whole game in my dad's Frontenac, listening to the game on the radio. It was so weird. And I can also admit I was a diehard Tiger Cats fan. So I remember being very happy from that moment. But
man, I didn't know you lived in Thompson, Manitoba.
Yeah, my dad was in construction. So we went up there to build a couple of gold, I don't know, nickel mines. I can't remember. I was only 72, but that was, yeah, I've been around. I've been around a little bit. Man.
I was reading Peter I'm reading Peter Mansbridge's autobiography, which just came out. It's great. He worked in Regina for about a year, and he worked in Churchill, Manitoba, and he was an agent for Transair, and he was also he worked at the CBC station in Churchill, Manitoba. There was no way to get to Churchill, Manitoba via road. You could only take railway or fly in. And Peter Mansbridge, I interviewed him for my book on the 66 Roughriders, and he was a Rider fan, and he loved Ron Lancaster. So living in northern Manitoba, he'd be like you, trying to get the radio signal, listening to the Roughriders games back in his days in Churchill, Manitoba. It's a great book. Pick it up. It's so good.
Because I've heard that.
I love Peter Mansbridge.
That's kind of his story, how he got discovered. Didn't some radio guy hear him announcing things over the...
He was announcing an incoming or outgoing flight, and somebody went up to the desk and said, "You got a good voice. You should go into radio, or you can go into broadcasting."
Like that. Yeah.
That was certainly an excellent Lana Turner moment for Peter Mansbridge.
Well,
nobody's ever asked us to do anything on the basis of our voice except for this podcast.
I'm saying I got the looks and the voice for print. So as long as we're leaning on that, I'll be fine with that one. Rob, do you want to read the final goodbye? Does you have one last statement to make?
Yeah, absolutely. This is our we have to read this or we will be shot. This is an edict from the highest levels of leader post management. I wish I had a Peter Mansbridge voice to read this because it would be so much more impactful were I blessed with such a larynx. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show. It sounds like I'm dictating because I am on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email Rob at rvanstone@postmedia.com and we'll read it on the air, on the show. I blew it. See, this is why I'm not in broadcasting. You can follow me, that being Rob, on Twitter at Rob Vanstone or Murray, and Murray's at Murray LP. So there we are, another Rider Rumblings in the books.
Well done. I just want to say a happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I went and bought a big turkey yesterday. First one, we didn't have family at the last Thanksgiving dinner. So it's going to be a nice one. We got all get together and enjoy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Kind of early.
Yeah, and we'll see if the Riders serve up another big turkey on Saturday at Mosaic Stadium.
I remember you and I fighting over the turkey leads in Montreal one night.
Oh, absolutely. And it's also a big weekend for Murray and I. Yes. Because the Denver Broncos are playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we put dinner on it. Yes. So I wish I was wearing my suitable Bronco garb now. So we've basically got a major eating fest at Fired Up Grill next week, riding on the outcome of this NFL game. So we're far too professional to wager on the CFL, even though single game betting is now a thing. Yeah. This is Tangential. For Murray McCormick, I'm the wholly discredited Rob Vanstone. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll do this again next week. And who knows what the topics will be next week, because this promises to be a really interesting game on Saturday. Thanks so much. Happy Thanksgiving, and take care of yourselves and stay safe.